The automobile is one of the most important inventions that revolutionized the modern world. In America, the rich history of car culture runs deep as technology continues to shape the future of the industry. Jason Stein,
former publisher of Automotive News,
is here to share the stories of people passionate about cars, from industry leaders and innovators to car-obsessed celebrities. Buckle up as Jason takes you inside the boardroom, onto the track, and around the bend on Cars and Culture on SiriusXM Business Radio.
Welcome to Cars and Culture on SiriusXM. I'm your host, Jason Stein. Could there be an owner base more passionate than Corvette? From the car clubs to the social following to the order banks that are filled with those who want the first and who analyze every inch of the car when a new one is launched. Corvette. Imagine the daunting task of designing a new one, or sculpting a refreshed version, or coming up with the details for one called E-Ray. For Rich Scheer, it's the culmination of a dream come true. When you grow up in the East Coast around Corvettes and imagine them and aim to design one and aim to study one, and then end up on the other end of the designer pencil, it's too good to be true. But what a task. Few jobs can be as daunting or have expectations that are higher. It's no issue for a man who's had his hand in the reincarnated Hummer, as well as other General Motors performance vehicles. It's a match made in the design studio. So what is the world like for the mind behind the exterior and interior of the newest E-Ray? And where do the opportunities turn when you consider what could be done with electric vehicles and the blank slate they create from a design and engineering perspective? Today on Cars and Culture, Rich tells all. From GM's Technical Center in suburban Detroit, he gives us his view on the process and the joy of creating the car that he only once dreamed about. The Corvette and its designer, here on Cars and Culture.
Hi, this is Rich Scheer. I'm with Jason Stein with Cars and Culture.
It is excellent to be in the presence of a designer at all times. We've had about half a dozen on this program, but I'm not sure there's one that's had as much buzz around the product that is now on the streets and has been unveiled as the designer for the E-Ray. Welcome in, E-Ray designer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Are you living a dream, Rich Scheer?
I am. Very much so. Yes, I am. Yes. I'll tell you what, it honestly, since the time I understood that there was such a thing about car design, I wanted to be the Corvette design chief. And the fact that I'm in that position now as the performance director, it is a dream come true. And it's an honor to be in this spot. It's a privilege, and I'm proud. I've got a great team, and it's just a joy. It's really a joy. It's the product I love and want to work on and want to do great things with. So,
well, I want to talk about that history in a moment, but let's first focus on the product that's out there. Do you, as a designer, because of how long the gestation period is and how involved you are for so long before anybody else sees it, how do you cope with the unveiling?
Yeah, it is funny, the unveiling, and it's funny sitting here with Renee on the communications side. By the time we actually unveil and reveal the vehicles and show it for the first time publicly, it's almost you have to reset what you were working on a couple of years ago, and sometimes depending on the projects, not long ago, and sometimes a little bit further back, and you have to kind of recalibrate. What was that? What were we thinking about again? But it is fun. It's such a wonderful moment when the team gets to finally share the work that's been done. And many times it's one of the it's like seeing your kid go to school for the first time. It's a proud moment, and I really love it. I love being able to share that with the team. And once you finally, I think one of the other really great times for us is that when the product finishes in design and we ship our final clay model and it's done and it's finished, sometimes we'll do prototype design models, but seeing the first development car driving on the tech center here, and it's nice sometimes when I'm up in the Chevrolet studio and you can look down out around the pond here, it's a wonderful scene, and you see a car kind of turning the corner for the first time, you're like, holy cow, there it is. And it's a wonderful moment to kind of see the car out amongst other vehicles. And it kind of gives you that almost like it's the first time you're seeing it. And that's always like it's like a Christmas present. a surprise Christmas present that shows up. So I
Well,
love it. It's a great time.
In its natural environment, right? I mean, that's the part.
Absolutely.
Anything can
Yeah.
look great in a studio, but
Yeah.
when you get it out with pavement and trees and other vehicles and
Oh,
people,
yeah.
right? It just
And
changes.
again, seeing it with other vehicles it's replacing, and they're driving past, and competitive vehicles, and it's wonderful. It's one of those moments where you're proud, you're like nervous. Did we get it right? Is it new enough? All that stuff. But it's usually a wonderful moment where it's like, my gosh, it's there. We could share it. We could talk about it. And it's a great moment. It's one of the moments in our business that's you can't wait for that.
Yeah, we've had Mark Royce on the program. I imagine rolling it out in front of executives like him might be the second scariest moment, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it is, and I'll tell you, it's great working with Mark and our other members of the SLT, our leadership team. They are so design focused, and much so as any time in my career, and it's wonderful because we have engagement with that team all the time. So I would say we see those team members once a month, once a quarter. And they get to see the process along the way, from the beginning sketches, scale models, the initial full-size models, and all the way through the process. They're engaged, and it's wonderful. So the conversations happen all the time. So usually by the time we're presenting them at the end of, like, okay, this is it, this is what we're going to production with, they've been along for the journey, they've seen it, they've kind of lived it with us. And it's great. You kind of feel like there's tremendous support from our leadership team on the design work that's happening. And again, it's usually by that time, there's no surprises. It is a little bit scary because you always want to make sure that Mark and Mary and the rest of the team are as excited as the team is about the new product. So, and usually they are. Absolutely.
Are you looking at their faces the second the drape comes off, or the second?
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
Like, you're dialed in.
Oh yeah.
What's Mary's reaction?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, in this business, being able to read body language and facial expressions before the words come out, yes, you have to be a master at that to be a good designer. And absolutely, you're definitely engaged, and seeing Michael Simcoe's body language and reaction and his words. I mean, he's a good poker player, and so he's usually like hard to read them sometimes, but it's important. You definitely want to. Hopefully, anytime you reveal something new, that you're getting that emotional, oh wow, we're really excited, we love what we see, we can't wait to get this product out to market. And usually the reaction is, how fast can we get this done? And then we have these reality checks of, this still takes time to do this, but yeah, those are wonderful moments.
You've been the lead exterior designer on the Chevy Blazer EV, the Equinox EV, interior exterior on the GMC Hummer EV pickup truck and SUV, which we're going to talk about.
Yep.
But is this one for you? And we'll go back to your history now. The pinnacle? Is this?
Oh, absolutely. Working on Corvette is the pinnacle, and it honestly, for me, it takes me back to, again, as a young guy, just being in love with Corvette. My dad was a Chevy guy. We loved Chevy products. He was kind of a kid of the 60s, and he had Chevelles and things like that, and Camaros, and Corvette was always like, oh my gosh, that's the top of our mountain. And we always loved them, coveted them, wanted them, couldn't afford them back then. And certainly it's always been kind of on my dream bucket list to have one, to own them. And then of course, becoming a designer, it was like, how do you get from a new designer to be on that team at some point, and then to be part of the team as I am now? It's a dream come true. But it is the top of the mountain for me as far as working on product. Working on Corvette is truly it's a pleasure. It's a gift. It's something that you have to really take serious, because I'll tell you, the customers on Corvette are just as demanding as they get. They're so passionate. They're so knowledgeable. They understand the history as much as you do. Their expectations are as high as yours. And so again, but that's, as a designer, you want to be involved in those kind of projects. That's what makes you tick.
But that makes it harder too, doesn't it?
It
Because
does. It
the
does.
expectations are so
You
uh,
bet.
are so much higher. Yeah,
It
yeah.
is, but absolutely. But I'll tell you what, it's again, it's a privilege to be on product like that has a history. You feel connected to that history. We talk about it a lot. We know that the things that we're working on, will not just be considered, hey, what's working now and in this time, but how does it fit in history? So again, there's things you talk about on a program like Corvette that you don't talk about on other programs, and but it makes it even more special. I think it kind of gets into your heart and your soul even deeper, and you just want to give it your best. You want to give it your all. It is very hard to try to get guys to, hey, it's time to go home. It's the end of the day. Go on home. It's like, this is not something that you just put the pencil down at 5 o'clock and walk away. It's a lot of times we're trying to get guys out of here. It's way too late. Come on, go home. But again, it's just part of what you do. It's a dream for most folks that are on this product, and they just want to give it everything they've got.
What were some of the design cues you knew that you had to keep in the E-Ray, and what ones did you avoid for fear of being perhaps trite?
Yeah, I would say on E-Ray, E-Ray, I think what was great about E-Ray is that it shares the wide body, right? So that's great, right? It has the same panels as a Z06, and that's great because that is just truly a beautiful setup. The track is wide, the wheels are deep, and they're large. And again, we just did some minor cue differences so that a customer, there's some body color elements, the hockey stick shape that's very iconic on the Z06. A customer can get that body color, the front piece and the grill. You can get that body color. It has specific wheels. I absolutely love the 5-spoke kind of pure E-Ray wheel. And that was something to try to, again, it's not completely new from the Z06 as far as major mounted body panels, but we tried to just give it just a bit of a trim difference. So again, when somebody saw that, they could quickly say, if they didn't spot the badge, they could say, hey, yeah, that's an E-Ray. And most importantly, like the wheels from a mile away, those beautiful 5 spokes, they just stand out. And again, I think it's one of the best wheels that Corvette offers. So to me, it makes it kind of stand out.
As a designer, especially with something so iconic, how do you avoid the dreaded design by committee design?
Well, that is something that no matter what project you're working on, you have to avoid. But with the Corvette, I consider it one of the crown jewels of General Motors, and so it is like there's lots of thoughts that come your way. But again, I think the team here has been doing this for a long time, and we have, I would say, we have, our leaders trust the work that's coming out of the studio. And I think once there's really good trust there, then it's not like every person shows up with their own ideas. They just kind of look at the team that's in here. I think the work I said is respected, and it's appreciated. And again, it's they kind of let us do our thing, and certainly along the way there'll be some comments, but I would say design in general has been in a very good place for several years now, and there's a lot less of that stuff, and so yeah, I haven't had to worry about that too much.
Yeah, you don't want design to get in the way of politics ever, do you?
No, no, especially not in the studio. Usually the music's cranked too loud for the politics to sneak in. So
Share a couple of anecdotes around the design or development of the C8. Just give us a couple of interesting moments that occurred during the iterations of it.
yeah, I would say just like some of the great moments. Again, C8, and I'd kind of give a lot of the credit to Tom Peters, who was my predecessor, who really was the design director that did all the development for C8. I've come in and kind of helped to kind of finish up some things, and then of course looked out to the future. But again, I would say overall that just some of the great, like just the amount of energy around Corvette and the development of C8. Probably we broke the record for how many scale models could be done for what a Corvette proposal could be. And then after the scale models, probably at least a half a dozen full-size models, and sometimes those models were clown suited, where you have one design theme on one side and another design theme on another. And so I think throughout that development process, no stone was unturned. That we didn't look for all the best that we could put on the car. So the effort was just incredible, absolutely incredible. Kind of getting from the beginning stage through, the final design. So
what was the timing from end to end? When did you first say, okay, well, here goes the pencil on the vehicle?
Yeah, I would say that the time frame for turning the car, it's, to me, the story goes beyond not just C8, but the fact of going mid-engine. And so that was a significant thing. And there had been studies, throughout time, that going back several decades about how to actually do that. And I think over time, the components that were available, engine size and transmission size, and certainly being able to do a package that we would consider, better than what the package and the chassis was for the front engine car. That work, there was work that was done, in the 2000s, kind of that beginning of that decade. There was work there was done, and I would say that was kind of after C6 time. And then there was kind of thoughts, well, maybe about then, but then, there was some great work that continued the development of the front engine car, which became the C7. And then, but there was always kind of this background work that was being done. We kind of have for Corvette, we have kind of a secondary studio that we kind of like to hide stuff. And we love to just continue the development work on it. And that's where a lot of I'll say the fundamental groundwork on the mid-engine package. And then once the package was kind of like, okay, we think it's understood, and we think we know what it's going to be around, and generally the size and the overall space of it. And we knew that it was relatively going to be around, like we could keep it similar to C7, if you would. And that package wasn't going to grow it too big or other things. Then I would say the normal development time for Corvette, it was similar to most of the other programs, a couple of years to get us from the beginning to the end. But certainly and I would say the only real difference is that there were moments that happened prior to that. But I would say mostly it was around kind of the development of the package and making sure that the chassis was right. Certainly from a design perspective, an engineering perspective, there was an upfront mule that was worked on by the engineers that they were kind of working on out at Milford to make sure that the chassis changes would still deliver or even improve upon the great setup of the front engine car. So there was always kind of this background development before we actually really got engaged with the true program. So
it must be completely liberating to go to a new package like that and to say, well, I can now reimagine.
Yes.
This icon in an incredibly different way. And of course, the headlines were enormous when it was finally confirmed that
Absolutely.
that was coming. Yeah, but it must have been, for a designer, must have been like starting over to some extent.
Absolutely, and I think as a designer, being able to affect the chassis and to be able to affect the whole vehicle, where the occupants are, the width, the height, all those sorts of things. That's the very best. That's the top of what we get to do. Many vehicles that we'll design, have, they come from something else that was preceding before it, right? It may be a subtle adjustment to a chassis, or they're very similar. If it's new, it's really not completely different from something that preceded it. But this one really was all new. And really, I would say, not only from the design perspective, but from the engineering perspective, it was a dream come true to be able to kind of have this new puzzle to solve. And again, it was such a high bar. The C7 really got the car to a great level. And how do you go and improve upon the performance of that car? And then, of course, kind of keeping in mind where Corvette has to live in the market, the kind of price tag it commands, where it wants to live. Of course, we wanted to grow the price tag of the car and kind of grow the performance and kind of take it to the next level, kind of exceed customer expectations, which I think happened. But again, along the way, it was like being able to move all those big puzzle pieces, that's a dream come true. That's what designers love. I had a chance to do that on the Hummer EV, and that was really great to kind of start off on that project with really zero, and then work on the chassis and the layout before you even get to what the exterior, the interior is going to look like. And to me, that is the very best of what we get to do. When you get those projects, it's a great opportunity. Wonderful.
Well, that's a whole different level of
Yep.
fun now. The GMC
Yeah.
EV, right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that development. What did you want to accomplish? What did you, what challenges did you face that you overcame, and what's your summation on it now that it's been out for a little while?
Yeah, I would say that the Hummer EV, that was like everything that we talked about that we wanted to do. That sometimes you put on the whiteboard in the beginning. Sometimes things get crossed off. As we went through, I think we just kept adding more and more and more, and then I think the whole team just said, why not? Why can't we? And we're not just going to do an EV pickup truck. We're going to do an EV super truck. And what does it mean to be a super truck? We want it to perform. We want, great performance, great off-road performance. When you do an off-road vehicle, performance is measured very different. You got rock crawlers, desert racers, all those sorts of things. And we wanted to be great at all of it. And then also, that was kind of the resurrection of bringing Hummer. But you didn't want to just bring it back to what it was. We kind of called it before it was like the Desert Storm Hummer. And we really wanted to kind of depart and move it and kind of take the brand to something very different. Not the Invader, but almost the Explorer. Like it's something new and it's almost something unworldly or beyond our world in a way. It was kind of a fun design thought that actually manifested into some of the design language and some of the kind of little Easter eggs that kind of lives in the vehicles. But what was so great about that project was, again, resurrecting Hummer, doing it in a new way, doing it on an EV. It got us to understand, like, hey, what could EV do as a super truck, as a performance vehicle? So we were kind of learning along the way of what the capabilities could be and should be. When all of a sudden we said, hey, we think we can actually make this thing crab walk. That was like, wow, that wasn't the first line on the list of things to do. But as we developed and learned what could this chassis do, it was great that we added that on as well. And actually does great things for off-roading. And it's also just a fun, great feature when you're cruising down Woodward and showing off on the cruise,
And then lo and behold, LeBron James appears in a commercial, and he's doing his own crab walk.
That's right. And that was another twist that came in. It was another one of those why nots that showed up as part of that project. That was really just truly amazing. And I think probably the most interesting part of that program was how fast it went. And that was amazing because to be able to do all this, to invent a chassis, to kind of bring this brand, to bring it part of GMC, this vehicle, the expectations, like once you put the name Hummer on it, there's like Corvette, there are expectations that must be met. And of course you want to exceed those. But again, to be able to do it, and this was one that came directly from Mark and Mary, that hey, we want to do this, and not only do we want to do this, and I remember it was kind of a April Fool's Day, which is ironic, right? It's great for the story. Right there in the beginning of April of 2019, hey, we want to do this, and oh, by the way, we want to get it out there, and we want to get it to market by September of 21. And the design guys are like, we're not the math experts, but we quickly raised our hands and said, well, that's fast. That's crazy fast. But that was the challenge. And it was like, okay. And, the whole team, engineering and design, we worked very quickly to figure out, okay, how do we need to cadence this development to actually do this, to actually get it to the end of 21, second half of 21 or the end of 21 when the vehicle wants to launch, and to get it to market. And it was just an amazing journey. And then almost at the end of the design process, the thing called COVID showed up, which was another curveball. Like, well, How do
Battling
we
that.
do
Yeah.
that?
Right.
And we quickly had to adjust, but we made it all happen. And from a studio design perspective, from that day in April, when we had zero, not a sketch, not a drawing, not an engineering layout, nothing, to final release of the truck was at the end of July of 20. And so it was like 18 months. And it's just, it's just never been done. Certainly in our company, I'm not aware of in another company, but that's just an amazing amount of work that happened. And it was a vehicle that, we designed the exterior, the interior, the front, the truck, the bed, the underside, the wheel well liners. Like, we got into everything, the underbody stuff. We were helping designing A-arms. We didn't stop, and it was just an amazing effort that happened in such a short time. And then, oh, by the way, we had in our second rail the SUV that was following very shortly, and the fact that we have some shared panels meant that we had to co-develop it. So it was kind of like, not quite two vehicles, but it was like one and a half vehicles done at that amount of time. Was that's to me the most amazing part of it, that we accomplished it. And at the end, it doesn't really matter how fast or slow you go. What is it? Is it a great design or is it not? And at the end, I'm really proud. I think the vehicle really looks new. I think it blew people away when they saw it. Once they got a chance to drive it, it was even better than how it looks. And it's an amazing vehicle. I was lucky to have one of the early builds for about a year. And I felt like I was a rock star everywhere. It was like that crazy part. Don't call yourself a rock star, but in that truck, I was a rock star. Sorry, Paul Stanley, but absolutely, we were rock stars driving that thing, and it was wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And I'm really proud of the design. It was, for me personally, I've been an exterior designer since I started here at General Motors, and the interior got thrown at us. Came in the studio with it, and it was really just so we could go fast, and we kind of joined an exterior and interior team very quickly. And so it was my chance to jump on, to be able to develop both sides of the vehicle, if you will. And it was a wonderful experience. I loved it. I got a chance to work on a part of the car that I hadn't before, and I just had a blast doing it. Working with our UX UI folks, developing the cluster and the ICS, and trying to kind of tell that kind of off to Mars story, and all the fun stuff that the cluster shows off was just an absolute delight. I almost felt like I was writing a movie as we kind of developed those components, and it was just wonderful. I just truly an incredible exercise. And I think at the end, a very successful design. So,
great story.
And I love seeing them driving around. Oh my gosh!
Well, they are a presence. That's for sure. Yeah. I mentioned your work on the Chevy Blazer EV and the Equinox EV. How does that transition to EVs affect the design of a performance vehicle versus a traditional car?
Yeah, I would say one of the great things about switching from ICE to EV, especially for like Blazer EV or Equinox EV, you kind of start with the battery and the battery pack. What's kind of, hey, there's a certain amount of batteries that are needed to create range and performance. And I think what's great and what designers love about it is that pack is wide, so the vehicles are wide, right? So we get, I remember, years ago, when you're developing new vehicles and you're always trying to push for width and you want great stance and get the vehicle planted. And we'd always have this, kind of challenge. Well, it's not as efficient as it could be. Well, now, the battery pack is really wide and it's going to be wide. So that's great. So that's number one. And oh, by the way, they need big wheels. And so now you're talking about, 19-inch wheels, 20, 21s, 22s. And it's like, so immediately when the designer starts sketching, I think we've actually been sketching EVs for the last 25 years and we just didn't know it, because now we have the proportions to do it, and it's just great. And I think the other cool thing about it is that the fact that EVs, again, range is very, very important, and making the vehicles that are aerodynamic and slick it's a huge part of it. I mean, we always worked on vehicles to make them, aero, get the best out of aero for any vehicle we worked on. But now with EVs, better aero is miles and range. And so now there's even a more focus on getting these things as efficient as we can. And that's certainly the goal. And now you're seeing these designs, when you look at a current Blazer ICE to the Blazer EV just, powertrain aside, it just has a real slick appearance. The vehicle's wider, it's a little bit lower, but it's longer, right? So the people space, the cargo space is just a little bit different. And that's great, right? So it just gives it all of a sudden, like, this new kind of vehicle gives us a chance to just do something different from a proportion stance, and it really almost feels like a great design sketch right out of the box. So I would tell you that in the design process, the upfront, like the first scale models and the first full size models, all feel great right away. In particular, a great story, the Equinox EV, like that development happened very quickly. It was actually worked similarly, not quite as fast as Hummer, but on the same pace. And that was just a couple of scale models. One of the scale models we quickly went full size with. And usually there's a moment where the scale model and the full size have this awkward teenage years. But I'll tell you, that one went right to full size, and it was just great right out of the box, and that helped us go very, very fast. And again, the Equinox EV, feels very new. When you see that going by, you're like, what is that? And to me, it's great to kind of take the expectation from a design perspective and just raise the bar for something that's an Equinox, and really kind of step out from all the other mid-size utility vehicles. They feel very new and they feel very fresh.
It's interesting, right, Rich? In the past, it seemed as though designers were, one, either given a mandate to make sure that these alternate propulsion vehicles look like science projects. I think of the Insight, the Volt, the Prius, right? Or two, decided on their own to design in some tech cues.
Yeah.
What was it, and did that work for consumers? And maybe should the design style for an electric car differ from an internal combustion engine vehicle?
I would say probably early on there was certainly discussions and vehicles that came out that EVs or hybrids kind of looked different. They looked a little bit different from the mainstream vehicle. Certainly, they were also trying to be aerodynamic for their own time, and I think some of that was a little bit unique, right? But they were kind of narrow. The wheels are small, and so the proportions just weren't quite right. And they kind of had there's a bit of maybe an awkwardness to them. And it kind of creates a different look. And then I think there's an idea that at that time that maybe customers that were, early adopters for those kind of vehicles wanted to stand out and wanted to be different and say, hey, I'm different. I'm an EV person. I'm going green. But I think as we learned, part of that journey was, at the end of the day, even EV folks, or folks that are really conscious about breaking away from ICE vehicles, they just want a great looking vehicle too. They're not looking to stand out and to be kind of this unique, strange, different just because the propulsion's different. I think at the end they want a beautiful car that's expressive and they feel good about. It looks great sitting in their driveway, and so that's been a lot of great feedback that we've learned and heard over the years, and certainly when we go into EV now, we certainly don't think, well, hey, it's got to look electric. We don't even really talk about that anymore. It's just like we just want to make the vehicle look great and look new and look modern, and certainly some of the EV platform gives us a chance to do that. Again, they really start off with great proportions, and that's for a designer that's half the battle.
We talked at the outset about your dream to design the Corvette. When did you know you wanted to be an automotive designer? And did you grow up in a car family?
Well, I did. Well, my dad certainly. Yeah, my dad certainly. He was. We loved racing. My dad was. He loved Chevrolet cars, especially the cars of the '60s. He loved all the muscle cars. Loved V8s. We used to tear them apart and work on them all the time in our backyard. Our backyard looked more like a junkyard than a backyard. But as a kid, it was just awesome. Go-karts and mini bikes and lots of cars. And we had a 56 Chevy and a 64 Impala and I can't tell you how many square body pickup trucks we had. But we were always working on cars and we loved it. And my dad and I, we would go to races. I'm from the East Coast, from New Jersey, and we would go all up and down the East Coast chasing dirt modifieds. And we just loved it. And of course, all the dirt modifieds, what was the powertrain in those cars? They were all Chevys, all of them. And there was kind of this pride element of the Chevy motor, the small block, the 350 or the big block. And there's something that happened in our family that made that very, very special. And, you couldn't, any other manufacturer, you just wasn't allowed in the driveway. Those are my dad's rules, certainly. And it was great. It was great. So, we didn't grow up here in Detroit, and certainly weren't connected to the auto industry, but we certainly were really passionate about Chevrolet and cars and just loved it. It was kind of funny. As I was kind of going through high school, just an accidental, one of those moments where my mom actually found a magazine article, and it was a magazine article. I want to say it was like in People magazine, and it was about Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. And it was a beautiful, like 3 or 4 page spread where they showed car sketches and models. And she saw this and she's like, oh my gosh, my son would love this, because I love cars. I was a good artist, but as an artist back then, I didn't know. I loved to draw. I drew all my Hot Wheel cars. I had to make sure that I kept track of all the Hot Wheel cars by having them drawn out. And that was kind of my first lesson on how to draw cars. And but she just thought, my gosh, this is a thing we didn't know about. And when I remember reading that article, handing it to my my teacher, my art teacher in school, the folks that kind of coordinate college visits, stuff like that. I said, hey, can you help me find colleges? And I thought, well, I live near New York City. There's got to be a car design school in New York City, right, or near that. And certainly there was some schools out there like Pratt, Parsons, but none of them that were really as dedicated to car design like Art Center was showing. And there's certainly the great art schools here in the Midwest at the school here in Detroit, where I graduated from, the Cleveland Institute of Arts. And really the Midwest is really, what's great about it is the schools here, we get the influence from the Detroit designers. But when she found that article and showed it to me, I read it. I'm like, that's it. I mean, it was like the light went on, and it was just after that, it was like, how do I get from here to there? And it was great. It was absolute focus after that, creating a portfolio, getting into design school, and then praying and hoping that the guys at General Motors would say, ask me to join. So I was lucky that happened.
Your story is the same as Aaron Crosley's to some extent, because she almost had a very similar path ultimately to become design director at Cadillac Interiors. But
that's great,
kind of East Coast beginning that I think she went to Syracuse and kind of a New York thing. So have you two compared notes on how did we end up in Detroit?
No, I haven't with Aaron, but I will catch up with her. But no, it is funny because I would say most designers, really the discovery of becoming a designer usually is accidental. It's not something that's really known about. I mean, most people think that somehow the designs come out of engineering or of a crazy computer somewhere, and you're just not quite sure. And certainly the path of becoming a designer, I probably would have bet that it would be, hey, start at an engineering school and then somehow transform into the design business, and then to realize that no, actually you go through an art college was like an eye-opener, like, oh, okay, that's how you go. But then when you actually see it's really a study of surface and sculpture and line and form, then it makes sense that your studies go through a design school like that. But at that point it was like, who knew how to get there? But then when you find out, like, hey, there's only a handful of schools that can train you to do this, And then, oh, by the way, the competition in those schools for a very few amount of jobs for these, it's like almost becoming a pro athlete. It's such a small community, and there's only just a small amount of people that actually make it through and get to these spots. It's a privilege. Probably going back, thinking about it now that I'm a dad, getting ready to send a daughter into college, I'd be like, hopefully we find a career that has a little bit more opportunity. Not such a small number of folks that graduate and get into these jobs. So,
does she want to be a designer?
No, she doesn't. No, I think she's thinking about marketing or communications or the other side. So be a partner with design. So
a few things here in the final few minutes. Aside from the E-Ray, what car, Rich, really takes your breath away as a designer, and why?
Yeah, can I pick the Hummer? I'm sorry, that's too easy.
Aside from the Hummer, the Blazer, the Equinox.
No, honestly, I love our trucks. Actually, one of the things that I'm driving now is a Silverado ZR2, and I love it. I was part of the truck studio for a time, and actually, I'm really glad to see the midsize trucks, the Colorados, and seeing the Colorado ZR2 just kind of coming out and seeing that. I love that. I've had a chance to drive it. I really want to get one of those. So that's probably it. Maybe the Colorado ZR2. I love that thing. So it's great.
You won't get in trouble, but is there anything outside of General Motors that you admire?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly, especially in working on Corvette, we're always looking at what our competitors, and we look at Porsche all the time, and it's, like looking at the latest line of the Porsche 911s, their GT3, it's just a beautiful, remarkable piece of design. And honestly, I'll tell you what Ferrari's doing, the design work that Ferrari's doing in their latest couple of models are just amazing. And certainly I'm a big fan, and there's always been a bit of inspiration there. So yeah, I mean, I love, I'm still a fan. I'm still kind of that young kid that has these supercars up on the wall. And I always really appreciate and admire the folks that are working on that part of the design business that are pushing design and performance. I really appreciate and love those kind of cars. The Aston Martins, they're just beautiful. That's something we talk about all the time, about the beauty that you see in some of these cars. And certainly that's something that we're always thinking about and appreciate when you see those cars, especially when you see them in person. They're just gorgeous.
3 cars, no cost concern, you want to own. What are they?
The first one is a 63 split window. So that is kind of, that's my top, like, gotta have that. If I can ever have that, like, I want that. I want a K5 Blazer. I'm just a Chevy guy. I love the Chevys, and it would be some shoebox, probably a 55 Chevy.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Your father would agree.
Oh yeah. If I said something else, I'd have a problem. Not with my bosses, but with my dad.
Right. We do a series of kind of quick questions occasionally with designers, and we've had, as I said at the opening, we've probably had half a dozen on the program through the last 2 years. I'm going to ask you about something, and you give me kind of the first word that comes to mind as it relates to design. Okay. Favorite watch?
Oh my gosh, favorite watch. Geez. I'm probably the worst one at that, because I'm not that much of a watch guy, to be honest. And I'm probably breaking the watch trends, because a lot of my design partners, man, they're watch, like they're foodies in the watch thing. So
they are.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Doesn't matter.
How about a men's clothing line or a shoe? Is there anything out there that you like that catches your eye?
Yeah, geez. I'm the last guy that's walking through Nordstrom's.
Or even consumer products. Is there anything that you like in the consumer space?
I'm trying to think. I certainly love the Apple products. I'm a big fan of the Apple products. I mean, I don't wear the Apple Watch, but I appreciate it. My kids got one. I think I buy Apple products by the dozens.
Yeah.
I really love what they've done. Again, a company that's really put design as a focus is certainly, those are the companies that I really aspire to. Apple's just done a phenomenal job. Their marketing, their design, their everything is, how do you not love them? Especially as a designer, they're really kind of setting a benchmark.
How about a favorite road to drive with one of those cars we just mentioned?
Tail of the Dragon. I had a chance. I've got an old Camaro that I love, that I turned into a pro touring Camaro. It's a '71 Camaro. I love that car. But then recently, I got a 2019 Grand Sport, so a C7 Grand Sport. And one of the reasons why I got that, it still has a manual transmission. So I still appreciate and love that. And I love the proportions of the front engine car. I love kind of the classic proportions of that. And I was able to do that about a year ago, kind of take that car and kind of take it for a ride down there. And it was just a thrill. Luckily, I didn't end up on the tree at the end of the route with any parts and pieces. The fascia stayed on the car. That's not always happened in my life. I've had some fun times at racetracks along the way, but this car made it out just fine. But that's probably my favorite road. Just there's lots of twisty, back and forth. I love kind of going up and down the mountains, and that's a great part. That's a great drive to take. So,
final thing. I know you can't obviously talk about future product. This is one of the golden rules in the auto industry, but
yeah, absolutely.
Are you excited about what you're working on next?
Unbelievably excited. Yes.
Why would we be excited about what you're working on next?
Because I'll tell you what, it's again, I would say that there's so much emphasis on design. It's really letting our the talented creative people just be very expressive and kind of just go out there. And I think the stuff that we're going to get to do next is just going to blow people away, because we're just I'd say it's like the creativity is just unlimited.
There's probably no better way to end the conversation with a designer than that line right there.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations on all the things that you've done and all the things that are to come. I guess we'll wait a couple of years and see what comes next,
yeah.
Right?
Hopefully we're having a conversation. You're telling me that you're blown away. So
okay, I'm sure we will be, and all of your Corvette faithful are saying that right now.
Yep, anyway. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being on the program, Rich.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks again to my guest today, Rich Scheer, Design Director at General Motors. To see my interview with Rich, go to the Cars and Culture YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to see more than 120 interviews and nearly 1,000 videos. And thanks for listening to the program. You could follow us on all social channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, as well as Instagram at Cars and Culture SXM, and on Twitter at Cars Culture SXM. I'm Jason Stein. We'll see you down the road.